Welcome to the Service95 Book Club with me, Lipa. Honestly, reading has been an anchor through every phase of my life, and this book club is a way of sharing that joy. Every month, I'll spotlight a book I've loved and sit down with the author for an open and honest conversation about the themes, the characters, and the world they've created. And because I've had the pleasure of speaking with so many brilliant writers already, I'll be opening the archive and bringing back one gem each month. So pour a glass, grab your book, and let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday night. For those who are listening at home, we're doing something a little bit different this month, and we're coming to you live from the New York Public Library. Wherever you are, you're in for a treat. So we're going to be talking about Flesh by David Szalay, my monthly read for October. And honestly, it's one of the most astonishing books I've ever read. And I just want to say thank you so much to the New York Public Library for hosting us, because if there's anything that exemplifies the spirit of Service95, it's a library, and my gosh, what a library. There are so many literary gems under this roof, and the best bit is that everyone is welcome here for free. Most importantly, I want to say thank you to you, David, so much for joining me tonight. I know you've traveled a long way, and I know that you have a new-ish baby at home, so I'm very grateful you're here. Okay, can I just say that I haven't been able to stop thinking about your book since the very first moment that I read it, and I think it's kind of ironic, really, because I can't think of a more European novel to talk about in this very classic New York setting. But before we start, I just wanted to tell you why I became so obsessed with the book.
Thank you.
Honestly, I've never read a book like it. I guess to kind of give you the bare facts, the story follows István, who starts out as a shy, awkward teenager in a drab kind of Hungarian housing estate through to his unexpected rise to London's upper set.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't even really begin to tell you what this book is about or what it really kind of sets out to achieve. I don't think I've ever encountered a character who has so little to say as István, and yet by the end of it, I cared about him so deeply. Somehow, while the language is just really pared back to its bare bones, you've managed to create this hyper-realistic world that's really brimming with tension and melancholy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping to find out a bit about how you did that, because it's really incredible.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll do what I can to to help you there.
All right. Well, should we dive in?
Let's dive in. Let's get on with it.
Okay. Firstly, can you explain the title? Why is it called Flesh?
Yeah, the title. I mean, the title was. It was kind of the working title for the book, actually. It was literally the name of the file on my laptop when I was writing the book. But at that time, I think I didn't really expect it to be the title of the finished book. I always assumed that there would be some more literary, some more elegant, more sort of polished sounding title would present itself. Because Flesh as a title, you know, it kind of sounds a bit tawdry, maybe. It sounds a bit almost vulgar. It sort of doesn't sound very literary. But in the end, when it actually came to trying to think of a better title or a more literary or more elegant title, we couldn't. I mean, when I say we, I mean myself, my agents, publishers. We weren't able to come up with anything which seemed to sort of nail the book quite like the word Flesh does. The kind of slight unease that I think it provokes, that sense of tawdriness, I think that they really fit the book ultimately. It speaks to something in the book, and obviously beyond that, it's a book, among other things, or maybe even sort of foremost, it's a book about life as a physical experience, life as being a body, and so it just everything, all the major sort of plot elements of the book involve physicality of some kind, and so it just seemed like a title which encompassed the whole book in one word, in a very, and also the tone of it, and so we stuck with it. There was a sort of slight sense of taking a risk by using that title, but I think it was the right thing to do, and I think I'm delighted that we took that risk and didn't call it something more sort of tasteful or genteel.
I think it's perfect, and I think I've got a lot of questions about form and character, but I wondered if maybe first you would set the tone for us a little bit with a reading.
Sure, yeah. I'll read a very short passage from the first chapter of the book. After only a few days, it's unbearable not to see her at all, not to know where she is or what she's doing. Even her hatred and anger would be preferable to that, is what he feels. And it's with that feeling that he knocks on the door of her apartment one evening. He isn't sure exactly why he's doing it or what he will say. He just wants to see her. He has to knock for quite a long time. Finally, her husband opens the door. "What is it?" he says. "Is she there?" István asks him. "What? Is she there? What are you talking about?" her husband says. "Is she?" "No," her husband says, already shutting the door. Instinctively, István pushes it open again. Her husband puts out a hand to stop him. "What do you think you're doing?" he says. Sure that she is there and that her husband just wants to prevent him from seeing her, István tries to push past him into the apartment. Her husband tries to stop him. There's a scuffle on the landing. Mostly it's just pushing and shoving, and then her husband falls down the stairs. He tries to hold on to the metal handrail, but he isn't able to, and there's a strange, loud sound as his head hits it further down. And then he's lying on the concrete floor of the half landing, next to his wife's plants, and he doesn't get up. István waits for him to get up. It's very quiet suddenly. He hears voices from somewhere down in the stairwell. When it's obvious that the man isn't going to get up, István starts to walk down the stairs. His legs are shaking under him. They're shaking so much that it's almost difficult to walk. He passes the landing where the man is lying, and where a few of his wife's plants have been knocked over, spilling soil onto the concrete, and keeps going down. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, let's go back to the beginning, to what happens just before this scene that you read. We meet István when he is 15 and he's just moved into his new flat with his mother somewhere in Hungary. It's an interesting starting point because we get no details of any of his earlier years or what really brought them to this place. Not long after they move in, he's seduced by his married neighbor, a woman who at the age of 42 he calls old and ugly. And it's not exactly a healthy or thrilling relationship, but nevertheless he feels that he is in love with her. And it leads to a catastrophic incident, which you've just described. To what extent do you think that this experience defined István's life?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, what happens with the neighbor, I think, what was fascinating to write, because I wrote that chapter, actually, that was the first thing I wrote of the novel. And at the time that I wrote it, I wasn't even entirely sure of where it was going to go. The rest of the novel didn't quite exist in my mind. So it was almost written as a standalone thing. And one of the things that most interested me about that situation was the way in which he goes from a kind of something like disgust almost about the neighbor, but he even from the beginning, of course, he's attracted to her in some way, but it's very complicated, and he has these feelings of disgust and shame, and a lack of comprehension of his own desire and what's going on, really. And then that sort of morphs into, over time, into a feeling that he is in love with her, which in turn leads to this sort of violent incident, which then has a lasting impact on his life. But the pattern, I think, the pattern of that relationship in the first chapter, where he is seduced, where the woman who seduces him has, in some sense, more power than he does in this early chapter, just because she's 42 and he's 15. That is a pattern that is then repeated later in the book in various forms. So yeah, I think we can certainly say that it does set a pattern in his life, which then persists.
Yeah, and I guess speaking about patterns, he does have the opportunity at one point to get together with a girl his own age, and his friend sets him up, and once he's alone in the room with her, kind of taking any kind of initiative feels like a step too far for him. I feel like it's kind of, I don't know, it's a sign of kind of the passivity that he shows throughout the book.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about his passivity, and in some sense it's true. And what the incident you've just described, which happens really at the very beginning, on like page 3 of the book, obviously he is passive, totally passive, and there is a kind of passivity about him. But I think I wouldn't want to sort of overemphasize his passivity. Actually, I think that in other ways he does show agency. Quite often, I think the agency that he shows happens between the chapters, because you get the chapters sort of, each chapter jumps forward by some years in his life, and often it's in that gap between the chapters that the acts of agency take place. Like, he moves to London between chapters 3 and 4. In chapter 4, we just find him in London, we just meet him in London, but it's kind of his agency that took that decision and did that. So yeah, I wouldn't want to overemphasize his passivity, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to talk about the jumping of years between the chapters, like you mentioned, because when the next chapter opens, several years have passed, and it's possible, at least to me, that it feels like those could have been some of the most significant years of István's life, as he spent them in a young offenders institution. And yet we're kind of given nothing about this time, except a suggestion that István now knows how to handle himself in a tough situation. And then he goes on to join the army, which feels kind of like a classic decision by a young man who's maybe a bit lost and directionless. But then again, the details that we're given are very, very spare. Did it take a lot of discipline to not give us more details from these periods of his life? And was there like a clear conscious... was it a clear conscious decision to skip over the years?
It was. It definitely was. And I mean, you see, the time he spends in the young offenders institution, part of it is that I just didn't feel entirely, I guess I just didn't feel that I would be able to say anything very interesting about that beyond the paragraph of information that we're given. I mean, that's the important thing. That was the important information about that. Or like his time in the army. When he comes back, he's in the Hungarian army, as you say, and he's in Iraq, and that's a sort of historical thing. There were some Hungarian soldiers in Iraq in 2003-4. And when he comes back, but his time in the army is sort of dealt with in its immediate aftermath. You don't really get much about the actual time there. But when I sort of came to write that, somehow I just, the idea of the soldiers having this very boring journey back from Iraq at the end of their tour of duty there, sort of the boring logistics of it, what that was actually like, the texture of that was just where my sort of imagination went with it. I was just, that seemed to me to sort of unlock the experience in a way that more sort of, if you like, conventional material describing it wouldn't sort of give that strong flavor of reality that I wanted it to have. So I think partly it's just that my imagination goes to those sorts of details and those sorts of situations. But partly, I guess, it's also to do with creating impact, creating, like how to describe something which has been described so many times before in a way that makes it seem new and interesting.
Now, I've heard you say that Flesh is a story collection hiding inside a novel. And I think that's really interesting because it does feel like each chapter would stand alone as like a snapshot in time.
Yeah. I mean, when I was writing the book, I quite deliberately thought of it like that. Thought of each chapter as a kind of self-sufficient unit in some way. And that was just a way of writing it, which appealed to me, or which sort of helped my imagination work on it. And I think that was definitely the approach that I took.
Yeah. So when we next meet István, he's in London working on the door of a Soho strip club. And it's here that his life transforms, into something quite unimaginable from all the chapters that have gone before. Tell us a little bit about this decision to place him in London.
Yeah, I mean, that was, in a way, one of the most fundamental things about the book. When I was first thinking about this book, I wanted it to have a sort of Hungarian aspect and a British aspect, or probably specifically a London aspect, because I grew up in London and England are the places where I sort of know, they are the places that I know the best. But by the time I came to write the book, I hadn't lived in London for more than 10 years. I'd been living in Hungary. And I didn't really feel able to write a book that was just set in London. I felt that I'd lost touch with the place in a way that would make that difficult, and in a way that wouldn't quite feel right. So I really wanted a book that had some of it from Hungary, some of it from London, and was in a way about somebody who was having a similar experience to the one I was having at the time, having their life sort of stretched between these two places. And I guess then it was just a kind of pretty obvious way to go with it, that in 2005, Hungary joined the European Union. There was an enormous movement of people from Hungary to the UK, specifically at that time. I have Hungarian cousins who made that journey at that time. So it was just an obvious way of of having such a story with a sort of Hungarian and an English aspect. So that was one of the first things that I sort of decided would happen in this book. So him going to London at that point was sort of decided very early on, I guess, in the process of writing.
Yeah, no, it felt like there was, like, the book moved with a lot of world changes that happened between Hungary and the UK, and quite monumental.
I mean, I wanted to kind of embed it in reality in a way, very specifically. So, I mean, that his taking part in the Iraq War was also sort of a similar thing too. And later in the book, there's some sort of COVID flits in. Because I wanted that sort of partly I wanted to write the book about the way that these big events that nobody really controls affect all of our lives,
Totally. As I was reading the book, I became really, really fascinated with the way that István speaks. And it's really extraordinary because it is so stripped down. But it's really realistic to the point that I think that very few authors dare to go to this place. It's, we get whole pages of, okay, sure, okay. And if it's all right with you, I'd love to give an example.
Please.
This is when István is working as a driver for the Nymans, which is a fabulously rich family in London. And at this point, his relationship with Helen, Mrs. Nyman, is kind of beginning to shift from purely professional to something a little more intimate. Tell me about yourself, István, she says to him one day. About myself? Yes. What do you want to know? He asks. Just something about you, she says. He's at the wheel of the Mercedes in slow-moving traffic on Piccadilly. Carl says you were in the army, Mrs. Nyman says. Yes. How was that? She asks. How was that? The traffic's moving again and he has to focus on it for a moment. Yes, she says. It was... He wonders what to say, what sort of answer she's looking for. It was okay, he says. It was okay? Yes. What does that mean? She asks. What does it mean? Yes. It means it was okay. I mean, this simply isn't a narrative trick, is it? I mean, this
No,
dialogue,
no.
I feel like it's entirely consistent throughout the book.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I wanted to write dialogue which reflected the way that people actually speak. And obviously it sort of generates a humorous aspect inevitably, because it's so sort of banal and so sort of, it just kind of goes blur very often. But I think, it contributes to the sense of realism, which I think is absolutely key to the book, to the way the book works. That sense of I hope, very convincing realism, which is, of course, what then generates the kind of emotional engagement, which is
Absolutely.
without which the book wouldn't really work.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt about it. I guess despite the spare dialogue, or I guess maybe because of it, I found this a really tense read.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I hope so.
I think I was constantly expecting something terrible to happen, and often it did, but not necessarily the way that I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
For example, István intervenes in a mugging down in a dark London alleyway and possibly saves the life of Mervyn, a random stranger. And I thought that the story was heading in a particular direction. You know, maybe Mervyn's a shady character and he might get some sort of hold on István. But while that's true that the encounter really does change his life, Mervyn plays a really small part and then just disappears.
Yeah. I mean, and that I mean, that's also to do with this sort of idea that each chapter is sort of self-contained unit. I mean, I think a lot of people probably expect Mervyn to have a longer-term future in the book, but he doesn't. I think that also, that's also a sort of realistic in a way.
It's like
I mean,
sometimes.
People do just go in and out of each other's lives like that. There are characters in the book whose presence is persistent, like István, obviously, István's mother, importantly.
Yeah.
And then Helen and Thomas are also sort of characters who run throughout large parts of the book. But then there are lots of characters who just go in and out. And that was...
No, totally. There's also that moment with Helen and István in the swimming pool, and it's possible that Helen's son Thomas saw them being intimate, but you never really know. And I think it's that kind of tension that's always present in the book that I think it's also, the same in reality. It's a sort of thing that you never really know in real life. Exactly.
Things remain unresolved, or they never quite. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's very, very clever. There's a scene later in the book where Thomas tells Helen that István exemplifies a primitive form of masculinity and wonders how she ever found that attractive. And István is really hurt by this, but do you think this is because this is not how he sees himself at all, or that it's maybe flying too close to the mark?
Both, I guess. A mixture of the two. I mean, there were several other specific uses of the word masculinity and references to that in earlier drafts of the book, and I took them all out except for that one, because I didn't want the book to become a sort of I didn't want the book to be interpreted too much as about that. But I left that one in because it kind of was, it did fascinate me. I mean, is István, the question of whether István does exemplify a primitive form of masculinity or not is one that I find impossible to resolve. I find it a genuinely interesting thing. what does that even mean? All of that is kind of, I guess, crystallized in that moment.
The thing that I also found interesting was that there's no mention of István's father. And I was wondering if there was ever an earlier draft.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, because I don't think anybody has ever asked me about that before, and it's such an obvious thing to ask about. I kind of anticipated being asked about it all the time, and this is the first time I've had to address it. I think that there was never a draft with any kind of further information about István's father, but obviously I took a deliberate decision not to have any information about István's father. And I think that's because I don't really want people, I guess, to psychoanalyze István too much. And by leaving out such a key piece of information, it makes it very difficult for people to do that,
Yeah.
You can't, without knowing the circumstances of István's father's disappearance, whether he ever had a relationship with him, what that relationship was, what the father's relationship with the mother, and without knowing any of that, you're deprived of a key piece of information about István, which makes it difficult or impossible to sort of, as I say, sort of psychoanalyze him based on things that happened in his childhood, because I didn't really want people to do that. I wanted them to look at him in a slightly different way.
Yeah, when I read the book, I found it, to be at least as much about class and distorting power of money as it is about masculinity.
I would agree, definitely, yes.
You have István working on the door of a strip club, and then as a driver, which are quite anonymous roles,
I
guess.
Yeah.
And then he has this incredible transformation into, rubbing shoulders with the upper echelons of society, which kind of changes a lot of his relationships.
Yes, yeah.
And I think this is kind of where a lot of the tension
Absolutely.
creeps in.
I think it's definitely true that
with the transgressing of the class boundaries.
Yeah. The book is very obviously, I think, yes, about that, and István's very troubled relationship with his stepson is also about that, and that's very important. That's very important. But I didn't want it to be too, it's also quite subtle. I think, István he does kind of, no one explicitly criticizes him in any way, like except for Thomas maybe, or no one. It's like, and I think again that's sort of real. The sort of difficulties that he encounters are quite silent and quite. He doesn't encounter open hostility really, apart from Thomas.
Right.
From Thomas.
Right.
But nevertheless, he is a kind of, from the moment when he sort of, that happens to him, he is even more of an outsider in a way than he was before in this new context.
I'd love to talk about Thomas a little bit more, but I really want to talk about the women in the novel, because your books are noted for centering male characters and for their observations of masculinity. But even though the story isn't told through the eyes of the female characters, arguably they shape István's life more than the men he encounters. Like you said, Helen, of course, and the neighbor in Hungary, and of course his mother, who plays an unexpected pivotal role, later in the book. Is that intentional?
Yes. I mean, definitely. It was really important. I mean, particularly the relationship with Helen, I mean, that's the most substantial. She's the most substantial female character, although you could argue that his mother is a kind of more decisive character in some way. But it was really important to me to try and make Helen real and to make their relationship real, to make it seem plausible what happens between them. And the whole sort of central, in the middle of the book, there's a kind of quite long bit set in Munich where they're just hanging out in a hotel while her husband is receiving cancer treatment in a nearby hospital. And that was I think that's a really important part of the book, because it's that part that kind of makes it plausible when they subsequently get married, because they're sort of bonded through that experience.
Yeah.
And it was really important to me to make that seem real and seem plausible. And actually, I really loved writing that part of it, because just this sort of long, rather aimless, but sort of melancholy and quite dark because of the situation with the husband, stay in Munich, living in luxury, but also in the presence of death and uncertainty, and the sort of very Helen's guilt and István's uncertainty about where this is. All of that was just fascinating to write about. It was just a very wonderfully sort of grey and eventless passage that is possibly my favorite part of the book.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tension throughout that part. I have to say I loved that part of the book as well. Let's talk briefly about Thomas, because he's not a very sympathetic character. But he volunteers at a homeless shelter a bit, but he has his driver do his drug run. And I thought there was something quite tragic about him, or even something a bit Shakespearean about him. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I mean, well, there are references in the book to Hamlet.
Yeah, it didn't pass me by that he played Horatio in the school play.
And so, yeah, there is a kind of Hamlet-y thing going on there. But yes, Thomas is not sympathetic. But on the other hand, he is, he's had a really tough time. And I hope that somewhat comes through as well. I mean, but anyway, yeah, there is this kind of, as you say, this sort of Shakespearean quality to it. And the sense that Thomas and István are sort of fated to be in opposition to each other, and there isn't really anything much that either of them can do to escape that fate. That was also.
I'm desperately trying to avoid spoilers, but I feel like we've given some. We've given some away, but there's this pivotal moment in the book where István is suddenly faced with this monumental decision, and I think you know the moment that I mean. And it's a choice that will critically define the kind of person he is.
Yes.
And he knows that in this moment his whole life could turn on this, whatever he decides. Did you have your own kind of quandary about which way he will go?
No. No, I didn't. The whole thing was going to go that way.
Okay.
But it was very important, and I hope I succeeded at least to some extent with this. It was very important that the reader was not sure, and the reader had some uncertainty at that point. Because in a way that's the defining point of the book. It is right. I mean, we shouldn't give it away.
No. Yeah, I think we do. There's one spoiler we're gonna keep. We're not gonna.
There are a few things I think that we need to keep up our sleeves.
Exactly.
For people who haven't read the book, but yeah.
Yeah. Fundamentally, I feel like this is a desperately lonely book. I mean, alone is even the last word in the book. And I have to ask, for all that happens to him, in the end, do you think that István is changed in some way from the young man we meet at the beginning?
Yes, I do. And in fact, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of about the book, because I think it does succeed in this. I think it quite accurately portrays the way that people change and the ways they stay the same. I think that István is both the same person, recognizably the same person at the end as he was at the beginning, and totally different in other ways. But it's very difficult, and this is good. It's very difficult for me, and I hope for the reader, to put their finger on exactly how he's changed. He's changed through the load of experience that he's carrying by the end. That's what changes him. These experiences have sort of cumulatively morphed him into something else, into something which he wasn't at the beginning. And I think that's how life happens. And there's something a bit fatalistic about it. And in that sense, István's passivity, yes, he is passive but I think that in a way we're all, to some extent, passive. We're all acted on by life in ways that we can't control. We're all changed by experience in ways that we can't control or don't intend. And that was something that I really wanted to sort of articulate in the book. But also I hope that, you say the book is about loneliness and is terrible things happen to István and it's quite bleak. But I hope that there is also, at the end of the book, a sense of the kind of beauty and preciousness of life, of being alive. And yes, I really hope that comes through as well, because I think that's quite an important part of what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I really found myself quite emotionally invested in István, and I really wanted his life to mean something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it does, but it means something in quite an obscure way, whatever. Yeah, yes.
David, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I can't wait to dig into your back catalogue, and I'm really excited to see what you do next.
Thank you.
For anyone who hasn't read Flesh yet, what are you doing? If you can, read it all in one go. I did mine in 2 sittings, but that was only because I had a show in the middle of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put it down. So please don't walk, run. And for anyone who wants to know more about David's other books, we've put some suggestions together on Service95.com, where you'll also find a playlist and a reading list that David has made for us. And you can also sign up for free to the Service95 Book Club newsletter to hear about my next monthly read. And if you want more book recommendations and author interviews, follow us on @Service95 Book Club. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Along with my new monthly reads, I'll also be sharing a conversation from the archive, some of my favorite chats with the world's best writers over the past couple of years. Trust me, you won't want to miss them. Make sure you're following the Service95 Book Club podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you love this one, why not leave us a review? Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.